Hey folks, good evening and welcome back to Ndaba Africa. This is Chris coming to you live from central Pennsylvania. Tonight is a segment called Liberty Under Assault, Politics of the USA. Just a moment, something's not quite right with my picture there. There we go. There we go. Got it sorted out. Okay. Welcome to the channel, folks. Waiting for my guest now, who was out at a Republican campaign rally and is just getting home a couple minutes ago. So should be calling in any moment here. Just waiting to hear from my guest. But welcome to the stream tonight. This is Chris. And my guest tonight will be Errol Webber, a candidate for California's 37th Congressional District, which includes the western part of Los Angeles, out there in California. His opponent is Karen Bass. I'm going to talk to him about some of the issues that are confronting Americans and Californians, and also just get a little bit of his take on being an immigrant in America and how things... Oh, excuse me. There we go. I dropped something over here. Where's it at? Okay. Not finding it now. I've had something right here that I thought, there it is. Okay, piece of paper I want to set aside. Hey, Bosch Zebra, Linda von Roy, good to see both of you guys there. All right, let me see if he's in yet. No, still not there yet. Just waiting for him to come in now. And anyway, he's just a couple blocks away when we spoke a few minutes ago. But folks, what a crazy, epic weekend it's been. Quite a long weekend here. Of course, on Friday we had the events that unfolded in Senegal, in the northern Free State in South Africa, in which folks from the economic freedom fighters showed up to cause chaos and mayhem, and did just that. They accomplished their goal. And a group of farmers and those who support farmers also gathered to show their revulsion at events and show the support for the family of Brendan Horner. And that was a follow-up to the 6 October arraignment hearing that was postponed when 2 suspects in the domestic terrorist murder of 21-year-old Brendan Horner did not get bail and did not get sentenced. Nothing happened. It was delayed. So it was delayed until the 16th. And so on the 16th, on Friday, we had Julius Malema, the leader of the economic freedom fighters, the so-styled commander-in-chief, showed up in Senegal with a 26 police car escort, as if he's some sort of head of state, introduced by a member of his party as he gave his rambling, race-filled, hatred-filled speech. He was introduced as the president. He's not the president. He might be the president of a political party, but he's certainly not the president of South Africa. But speaking of which, where is the president of South Africa, folks? Where is Cyril Ramaphosa? And speaking of those sorts of events, folks, what's happening here in the States? Oh, here we go. Here we go. He's coming in. My guest is coming in now. Let's get him up on the screen as he tries to come in. So, yeah, Cyril Ramaphosa, we need to put him on a milk carton. He seems to be missing in action. But events here in the States have been quite crazy. The president has kicked Corona's backside and is on the campaign trail all over the country, just kicking it. It's been quite a fascinating situation. Okay, why? Oh, still joining, okay. Sorry about that, folks. Yep. So, yeah, what's this? Bosch Zebra, true, was a crazy week, not to mention your work ethic. Well, thank you, Bosch Zebra. Yeah, I'm kind of knackered. I'm pretty tired with all these streams. I mean, I've done probably about 25 hours of streaming in the past several days. It takes a lot out of you just to do that sort of thing, and especially when you're not getting paid for it. So it looks like his connection's having a hard time getting in on us here, so we'll see if he can get in just a week. But yeah, it has been quite the strange week. The good news is that nobody was seriously injured or harmed at the events that took place in Senegal. That's very good news. So that's also good. Oh, there we go. Almost there.
All right, here we are.
Oh, wait a second. Wait. Okay, that's not fair. You got a cool hat on. You have to give me just a second. I have to get my hat, okay? Just give me a second. Hang on.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's see what you got.
I was going to play it down to be kind of chill. I mean, I know you are in L.A. County there.
You know, I can.
No. Put the hat on. Put the hat on. I didn't know. We're live, by the way, right now. We're live, just so you know, okay? I'll sort you out here.
Good.
Yeah, because I'm already on the air of the show. So let me just sort this out. So what I do is now you are in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. I don't know if you can see the stream. Are you watching it? Okay, great.
I can see your stream.
Okay, great. We do that so that the guest gets more of attention because this is about interviewing you and talking to you. So what I'd like to do, Earl, is just kind of teach this more like a conversation than an interview, if that's okay with you.
That's totally fine.
Okay, so but I have to ask you, we have to run through these, and you tell me which one you prefer. Is this one nice? You like that one?
That one's a good one. That's always a great one.
Then we have.
I too have to go through a bunch of different hats.
We have
Let's see what else you got.
the Duck Dynasty one. There you go.
The camel one.
Yeah. Then we have the Trump train. Okay, here you go.
Okay.
All right, and then
All right.
finally the Commander-in-Chief version, which is one of my favorites right there.
You know what? Do the Commander-in-Chief version.
Okay,
I think it'll look good. There we are.
There we go. All right.
There we
All
are.
right.
Yeah.
Now I was just concerned.
Because you already have that red sweater.
There you go.
I'm like, wait a minute. Do the blue hat.
Well, I didn't know if you're going to wear a hat. I was a little concerned about your safety. You are in LA County. Is it safe to wear a Trump hat there?
Well, I am at home, so it's all good.
But these days you never know if it's even safe the way some of these people on the left are behaving.
It's not. It's not.
I saw a video that was posted on your campaign page for Congress. A video of a young black man who apparently been beaten by Antifa supporters. His teeth were knocked out.
Yes. Yes, by the loving, tolerant, inclusive left. Yes.
Well, I think Errol, I think you're doing them an injustice. They are the warmest and cuddliest people, and they never are the things that they project onto the rest of us. It's like I remember, of course, the left is always talking about compassion and things like that. But remember last year or 2 years ago when Kavanaugh was in the hearings for the Supreme Court, and a leftist tried to
they were totally compassionate.
Tried to out Lindsey Graham. I mean, who cares whether Lindsey Graham is straight or gay? But apparently the left cares because they tried to out him. That was a ridiculous sort of thing. They're just crazy.
Wait, isn't the left the ones who always want to
your connections
LGBT nuts. Community, and they believe that
Are you on your mobile or are you on your Wi-Fi network?
It's on my end. One moment, please.
Okay, it's fine. If it's your mobile network.
I'm on my Wi-Fi network. Yeah, it's not my mobile network.
Oh, okay.
But.
All right, let's see if we can't keep going then. Okay, so folks, I'm going to take my hat off just so I can concentrate because I keep looking at my hat. You can leave yours on. Okay, so folks, just so everybody knows, this is Errol Webber. He's a candidate for California's 37th Congressional District, which includes Los Angeles and into Beverly Hills, if I'm not mistaken, looking at the boundaries there. Okay. So did you see the Clampetts there, or are they long gone? No, just checking. Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh my gosh.
But but you don't sound like somebody from LA. You sound like you might be a little further east and south than LA. You were originally from Jamaica, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct about that. And I used to live in Baltimore when I came to America, and then lived in New York. Well, lived and worked in New York, and then came to California because I got tired of freezing my butt off in the cold. Now I'm running for a job where I have to go back to DC and freeze my butt off in the cold.
well, that's fair. It's interesting because I spent a lot of my time in Africa, and South Africans, whether they're white or black or whatever they are in South Africa, they're always complaining when the temperature drops below 55. I'm like, this is like heaven. I'm a Viking. I love that temperature. Fall is my season. But they're bundled up, wearing big blankets. It's always entertaining for me to see that. I have empathy for them, but at the same time, I'm feeling quite good when it's 55 degrees. So Jamaica, you grew up there. I've been to Jamaica a couple of times. Fascinating place, but not to speak ill of it, but quite a dangerous place too. A lot of violent crime there, a lot of murders taking place.
A very dangerous place, so much so that that's part of the reason we moved to America, because in 2001, our house was hit with a rocket about this big, and it blew up in our house and made it uninhabitable. So we went and got 5 permanent residency visas for my dad, mom, older sister, younger brother, and myself, and we came to America in the summer of 2002.
Oh, wait. Okay, I got to stop you right there. This must be fake news. How could you come to America in 2002? Because Bush was president. He's conservative. Republicans hate immigrants and they hate black people. At least that's what I've been told. Isn't that the truth?
A lot of people try to say that Republicans are anti-immigration, but interestingly, there's one delineation. We are just pro-legal immigration. America is great when legal immigrants come to America and work to make America even better than when they came. That is what's important to the Republican Party.
And some people wanted me to talk to you specifically about the immigration thing, and we'll do that throughout this here because you have a fascinating story. But the legal point, of course, being important. But the other thing too is that immigrants have traditionally come to America, wherever they come from, with the exception of those brought in bondage during the slave trade era. But with the exception of that. And indentured servants, but they came for labor. But with the exception of that, people have come to America because it was different and it was getting away from something else, oftentimes escaping. But they came, and people always want to use the word assimilate. That's not entirely accurate. Cultural groups have come to America. They have contributed is the phrase I prefer to use. They add something to our kaleidoscope of who we are. But if things are important to a family, they retain it, they inculcate it in their progeny, their kids, and then it carries on. And perfect examples of that, I think, very quickly to tell you, is the old Spanish-speaking families of the Southwest in New Mexico, in Arizona. Those families have been there 350, 400 years. They speak Spanish, they speak English, they're Americans, they're part of the society. And then you look at the Amish and Mennonites, they speak German from the 17th century still today, but they pay their bills, they contribute to society, they've retained what's important to their culture, and they've contributed. Unlike some recent immigrants, and I'm not talking about south of where I'm talking from anywhere in the world, some groups of recent immigrants have come to America and demanded that America change their laws to like Sharia or change our behavior, to adopt ideas from other countries. And I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of folks are coming here from failed places, and they want America to adopt the failed policies.
I was just talking about that last night and today, because right now we have our freedoms on the ballot, and you have to take into account that here in America, we have so many immigrants who came from so many failed countries, knowing that America is the promise of freedom. America is the ability for them to take advantage of opportunity to define for themselves what the American dream looks like. And then when they come to America from these failed socialist and communist countries, they look at existing Americans or people born here in the United States championing socialism and communism like it's the next best thing. And you're like, wait a minute, slow down. Have you actually seen socialism and communism in action? It's pretty gnarly.
I would have to agree with you. I actually, because I have seen it up close and personal.
I've seen it up close and personal.
Yep, 36 years in the U.S. Army and 23 of those overseas. So I've been in some places that have been not the most complimentary places, really failed states. But yeah,
I'll give you a great example.
Please do.
Before 1980, Zimbabwe used to be called Rhodesia, and they got their independence in 1980, and Robert Mugabe took power, and they were supposed to change hands every 5 years. Well, that didn't happen. And right in the middle of the 1980s, they had a civil war between the two major tribes, the Ndebele down south and the Shona up north. This civil war is called the Gukura Hundi. 30,000 Ndebeles were slaughtered, and Robert Mugabe, wanting to pay his soldiers, he stole farms from the white farmers in Zimbabwe and gave it to his cronies who didn't know anything about farming. The country stopped producing, the country stopped exporting, their dollar hyperinflated, and they went down a terrible spiral of hyperinflation over the next 2 decades. So when I went to Zimbabwe in 2008 to go film a documentary, I got to see the effects of 2.5 decades of destruction at the hands of the socialism that was brought about by China-loving Robert Mugabe and his policies. So they had a water shortage and a fuel shortage and a food shortage. They had hyperinflating currency. They had cholera and malaria killing 300 people per day. You had an autocratic government that went to great lengths to protect their position in power. So they would have their cronies go out and chop off the arms and legs of people who didn't vote for them, or have his cronies burn people's houses down for not voting for him. This is the kind of oppression that they dealt with in Zimbabwe. And then I come here to the United States. I experience this juxtaposition between flying to Zimbabwe for 9 months and then coming back, and I'm just like, why are you guys championing the same thing that just failed in Zimbabwe? We saw businesses leave Zimbabwe. We saw whole industries leave Zimbabwe. We have empty store shelves in Zimbabwe. And I'm like, wow, they want to bring this stuff here to the United States with the centralization of power, the centralization of resources, the centralization of the means of production, the centralization of currency, all of these things. They want to just give government more and more power and strip the people of their power. And then you can't even fight back or push back because none of them have guns. And then the press is completely controlled by the state media. And I'm just by the state party. So I'm just like, wow. after all these years of seeing the destruction of Zimbabwe, I come back to America and I see people who have never set foot outside of this country, have never had any experience just championing socialism. While I was waiting for you to get online, I got a phone call from a person in my district who's running for city council. Her name is Nitya. I'm not going to give you her entire name because I'm not going to advertise her. But she is supported by Bernie Sanders and funded by George Soros. And they're like, will you be voting for Nitya? I'm like, no, I'm going to choose otherwise. And they said, oh, are you going to be voting? Of course, it is so important that everyone gets out and vote. Folks, we all need to get out and vote, because if we sit back, the Democrats, or as I want to call them right now, the communists, are going to take over the United States. And we don't want that, because too many countries have had failed societies as a result of communism. And it is incumbent upon us to learn from these examples and not repeat history.
No, absolutely. It's incredibly frustrating. I spent all this time in uniform supporting defending the Constitution for all Americans, whether they're Native Americans on an Arapaho reservation, or they're poor folks living in Appalachia, or they're black folks, white folks, immigrants, those born here. It doesn't matter. They're all Americans. They're all part of the same team, and it's a home team. And I come back here and I listen to people lie about my country and go on, and the media just covering it up, and politicians allowing armed insurrections to take place in our cities. It's just so disheartening. And I wonder, what have I been doing for 30 years? Have I wasted my life as these people try to dismantle the Constitution? It's absolutely crazy. But you speak about Zimbabwe. I was there in 2000 in Montebello when they were murdering farm workers and farm owners. I was there. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. And there was no fuel, as you said, and that's a periodic thing there, because they couldn't pay the Kuwaitis to get the oil to come from the pipeline up through Mozambique. So when I left, because they had no hard currency, when I left Botswana, I was at Kasane in Botswana. I had a truck that had it had 168 liters between the primary tank plus the auxiliary tank in the truck, and we bought 4 20-liter jerry cans. So that's an extra 8 liters. We drove from Kasane into Vic Falls, went to Vic Falls, down to Bulawayo, over to Masvingo, where Great Zimbabwe is at. And then I called the embassy and said, we're coming up because we're supposed to go to Harare. And they said, well, we don't have any fuel for you. We're almost out of fuel here at the embassy. So if you come here, there'll be no fuel. You'll be stuck. I'm like, okay, that's not a good prospect. So we turned around. We drove back. We went back to Bulawayo, went to Matopos National Park, which is where Cecil Rhodes is buried. A beautiful location there, gorgeous. Like little gumdrop hills. It's really interesting.
Yes, it is.
And then drove across the border and went to Francistown. And the next morning, when I went to top off the truck, of course, we'd used all the jerry cans. They were empty. There were 5 liters. It took 163 liters to fill up. That's how close I was to running out of fuel in Zimbabwe.
5 liters. That's a gallon.
Exactly.
That's a gallon and change. Wow.
That was a close one.
So really quickly, I know we're going off topic on this, but what was your experience culturally between Zimbabwe, like Bulawayo, Plumtree, Esigodini, that southern area, versus the northern portion of Botswana, Francistown, or even Gaborone? What was your experience with those two cultures?
Well, it's fascinating because, look, I have a lot of, actually, I love the Ndebele and even Shona. They're decent people. The problem is the NUPF. It's not the people by and large, for sure. So, but the Zimbabweans, generally speaking, are very polite, very friendly. I mean, I'm not trying to stereotype, but I mean, generally I've had really good experience with Zimbabweans, and that's most often outside of Zimbabwe where they've had to flee, whether it's UK or South Africa or the US or elsewhere in Europe. Fantastic people. Botswana's great too, but I have to give you a little secret here. This is inside baseball, so that you know this. So people ask me when I lived in Arizona, and okay, for the leftists who aren't trolling tonight, they're clearly not here, but for the leftists, just, make sure when you cut this portion of the video that you make sure you get the soundbite right, okay? All right, so Earl, here's the deal. So when I lived in Zimbabwe, or in Botswana, people said to me, they said, what's it like? I said, well, it's a lot like Arizona with a lot less white folks. And what I meant by that is that the environment's almost the same in Botswana. It's very similar to Arizona in many respects. And the roads work. The roads are functional. The police are honest. The electricity works. You can get things. It's safe to run about. You don't have to worry about being robbed or shot or stabbed and so a little bit facetious. Now, the one thing about people in Botswana, I have to tell you this, and if you ask other Africans, they'll tell you this. The thing about Botswana is that they were never actually colonized. Now, people always have this discussion. I had this with my students when I taught African studies about which countries in Africa weren't colonized. They always say Liberia, and I said, no, it was colonized by Americans. They imposed an alien political system on the indigenous population. The fact that they were brown and black doesn't mean they weren't colonists. They colonized Liberia. And then Ethiopia was briefly colonized by the Italians for 5 years, mostly just oddists. So I always tell people, I say that Botswana is a place that was never colonized because it was a protector. They approached the British and said, hey, look, these Boers, we don't like them coming through here. Can you help us out? So the Brits felt it was so unimportant that they left the capital in South Africa, in Mafeking. So it was governed from outside of the territory, and Bechuanaland, as it was known, was left to its own devices by and large. So the Dikosi, the chiefs, ran it.
I learned something new.
Well, the Dikosi, the chiefs who ran it, the three who helped get it started, they pretty much had their own thing. So the traditional system of political interaction in which the chiefs, the Kosi, would sit around and argue disputes, that remained in place up until 1966 when it became independent. But here's the thing. Because the Botswana were never colonized, I tell people, I said, they're great people, but a lot of Africans don't like them. And people are like, what do you mean? And if I tell Africans, they know what I'm talking about. Well, it's because the fact that, you go a lot of places in Africa, and if you're white or European, you'll get this deference, which is artificial, where people are like, oh, in West Africa, it's chef, or patron. And it used to be in Southern Africa, it was boss, from Afrikaans, boss, like boss. And I don't really like that. I'm very uncomfortable with that. I grew up in poverty, and I carry my own bags, it's sort of thing. So it was always uncomfortable for me. But in Botswana, nobody says that to you. The Botswana don't look at you as if they're not your equal. In fact, they look at you as if they're better than you are. And that's the joke there. So,
well, it's not.
What's that?
Not a joke. It's kind of what I experienced. It's not a joke. It's kind of what I experienced when I went to Gaborone.
You see? No, you see. Look. Don't get me wrong. I love Botswana. The Botswana are wonderful people, but
food is great.
But they don't. But they don't tolerate fools. They don't think that anyone's any better than them. That's one of the reasons why they're successful. I mean, sometimes they think they're better than other people. Some of them, and Africans will tell you that. When I was in Ethiopia, I can't tell you the number of times other diplomats I talked to, and we're talking about Botswana, like, oh, those people, man, they think they're God's gift to the world.
Fantastic.
So I had a question here from a gentleman who could make it tonight because it's 3 a.m. in South Africa. And, a big portion, about half my audience or more is from South Africa. And so I just want to bring this up. He goes by, he uses a pseudonym. It's just kind of funny. It's for a well-known YouTuber. He puts it backwards. But anyway, he says he won't be awake for the live stream. He said, however, I want to know if you can ask him when you go live, how difficult it was for him to leave his country of birth, migrate, and find new roots in a foreign country. That's a good question.
Oh, okay. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. Had a lot of fun doing that. My dad invested a lot in flight simulation programs in 1998. And when I came to America, I was still very much interested in filmmaking. You heard my little bit of a backstory that we essentially got bombed out of our house when a rocket hit our house and blew up. But when we came to America, the biggest culture shock for me at the time, I was 15, the biggest culture shock was the education and how people respected education, or the lack of respect for education that I experienced in Baltimore. You see, in Jamaica, I'm not trying to pit one country against the other.
No. But we could talk about Baltimore's education system for hours. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. When I was growing up in Jamaica, I went to a private elementary school and then a public high school, Wilmer's Boys High School. And for us, there was a respect for education, a respect for elders, a respect for teachers. And it seemed that more people were competing with each other to be the next Rhodes Scholar. Mm-hmm. And then I come to America, and there are students in the class taking pleasure at throwing paper balls at the teacher and seeing who can be the biggest menace. I'm just like, do you know how much good you can do with your life if you just sat down, shut up, and paid attention?
Yeah.
So here I am, 15, 17, 18 years after high school, and many of the people I went to high school with are either dead, in jail, or having kids and they're still in Baltimore and haven't done much with their life. I know one friend, he became a graphic designer, good for him. One friend, he became a lawyer, good for him. Another one, I forgot, one became a music producer, but beyond that, everybody else just kind of fell off the map, and it's unfortunate. What we need to do is we need to start championing good values for people wanting to better themselves and incentivizing people bettering themselves at a very age so that we can take charge of our lives going forward and define for ourselves the American dream. What did my American dream look like when I came to America? I wanted to be a pilot. Then I got into filmmaking when I was in church one day, and I observed a camera operator operating this gigantic broadcast camera. And whatever that camera person did affected what came up on the screen. I was like, that's kind of cool. I want to try that. So they gave me a go at this camera operation, and the following Sunday they threw me on camera, and I was hooked. So after that, we learned to do more of broadcast work in church. I went to film school and studied film for 4 years, got really interested in documentary, and then right after graduating college in 2008, went right into the documentary world to make films. And the first film was about a group of musicians with disabilities in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. We filmed at the King George VI School for the Disabled in Bulawayo. Filmed in Vic Falls, and we filmed in Harare, we filmed in Esigodini, we filmed in Chegutu, we filmed in Jambezi. I'm sure you know all of those places. Mm-hmm. And we got to see what it's like for a disabled person to navigate a country where everything is going against them. After that, we finished that film, sold it to HBO. That film ended up winning the Oscar in 2010 for Best Documentary Short. So it's just like first film out of college, wins an Oscar. Let's keep going. Did a documentary about education, public versus private education, and what it takes for a parent to get their kids the best education possible. That film, American Promise, we took it to Sundance. It won Sundance in 2013. And then started doing more documentaries about access to healthcare in rural America, mm-hmm. about bullying, the school to prison pipeline, about prison re-entry, about police community relations, all of these big, heavy issues. And throughout my years of documentary making, I found that when you do all of these screenings and town halls and conferences and whatnot, what are you going to do with all of these learnings? Are you going to sit on the information, or are you going to like take this knowledge, turn it into policy and lobby existing incumbent lawmakers? Or are you going to take these issues and run on them yourself? So I chose to run on these issues myself and do a run for Congress. So for me, it was a difficult upbringing doing this cultural shift from Jamaica to the US, but it was more so pronounced for both of my parents. Both my parents have doctorate degrees in Christian marriage counseling. So when they came to America, they were either overqualified for many jobs they applied for or underqualified for certain jobs that they applied for. So like we went many months without having a car here in the United States, but over time we did work it out.
Well, that's quite a challenge. So there's a couple things I want to get to, but first I have to correct you, Earl. This is very important. I think that you've overlooked something here. I think the issue here, the reason all those problems happened for those guys in Baltimore is because of systemic racism. They had no opportunity in this country. It wasn't disdain for education or things like that, right? Are you there?
I'm here. I'm like, did this guy go full liberal on me?
No, I'm being a little cheeky here. That's you're from an Anglophone country. You'll appreciate the word cheeky. No, I mean, it's okay. So let me just put this in focus a little bit too. Now, to be fair, you're from the Caribbean. You're not African. You're of African descent, obviously. One would guess based on your physical appearance. But you're not African. And you're an immigrant. But I have to make a clear distinction here. I have dozens, hundreds of colleagues, friends who are recent immigrants from Africa, Black Africans, primarily from West Africa, but from other places as well, who've come here since 1990. We're talking about 2.5, 3 million folks from Africa have come here in that time frame. Almost every one of them I know has been a wild success. They work for UBS in New York, or they work for a lawyer, or they're doctors, or they run Home Depots in College Park, Maryland, or they run restaurants, I don't know any of them that are losers and failures. I'm sure there are, just the odds. Somebody is, but I haven't met them. So my point is this, is that when I hear about systemic racism and this society is stacked against people, I sit there and scratch my head and I look at recent immigrants who get here in 5 to 10 years. They're doing better than virtually anybody in the historic African-American community. And so when people ask me about that abroad, I say, well, part of that is that community, not everybody obviously, but the leaders in that community who call themselves leaders, and that community is a tough phrase to use because black folk are different all over the country. I don't want to lump all black folk in together, but I think you get my point. But there are these charlatans who pretend to speak for Black America, white and black, who do this. And they live a culture of victimization and talk about victimization all the time and blaming others for everything rather than trying to uplift people. And they've destroyed the black family in America, so to speak. 78% of black children are born out of wedlock. That's shocking. But it's not like it's just black folks. 45% Hispanics now, 25% of whites, and even almost 10% of Asians are out of wedlock in America now. So the traditional family is destroyed. No responsibility, no respect for education, no, and blaming others. And when I look at recent African immigrants, they're all successful. So if the systemic racism is here, if there's systemic racism preventing people of color from succeeding in America, then these people from Africa must be the best and brightest and superhumans from the world because they've overcome it.
I totally agree with you on that. I want to share with you a couple things that Democrats have done in my district that have done a disservice for many of the people in the community. My district is, the 37th Congressional District is 25% black and 25% white, 39% Latino and 9% Asian. And the median income is $46,000 a year. Half the district is living well under $46,000 a year.
And we should point out that 46,000 is well below the national, which is about $67,000 per person. So,
correct.
So if half your population's half of that, that's a lot of poor folks in your district.
There are a lot of poor folks in the district, and you have to take a look at what Democrats have done over the past 100 years. Think about economic disinvestment when it comes to redlining in the 1930s through 50s. Educational disinvestment when it comes to segregation and locking kids into going to a school based on their zip code, not based on what that child's aspirations are. You look at disinvestment when it comes to the judicial system working against black people with mass incarceration after the war on drugs going into the 90s. So here we have 100 years of Democrats locking black people up, shutting them out of good schools, and locking them out of opportunities to build generational wealth. And then they wonder why they are in the position that they're in. And they just keep voting Democrat over and over again, because right before election time, they get a quick handout from the Democrats and they're like, oh, I guess I'm going to hand the Democrat my vote yet again. And it's time for all Americans to wake up and recognize that you cannot just continue to vote Democrat by default, almost by default, but it's time to start voting on our conservatively held values.
I heard somebody in the background there. Sounds like you're having a barbecue.
It's somebody driving down the street.
Oh, okay. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, absolutely what you're saying there is absolutely true. It's just astounding how, well, you know, I don't, we haven't talked, so you don't know my backstory. I mean, I've lived in all kinds of circumstances. I lived in a housing project near Annapolis, near Crownsville, Maryland, like 300 families. 3 of them are white. My neighbor, my best friend, we used to bounce the ball off the steps in the back of the apartment complex. One day, we're about 7 or 8 years old. One day, his older teenage brother and the friends came around and were hassling the 2 of us. His name was Goody. His parents should be disciplined for naming their child Goody, but that was actually his name. But he was a good guy. Goody and I were hanging out, and his thug teenage brother came along. He started hassling both of us. They threw me to the ground, pinned me down as a skinny little kid, pinned me by my shoulders, pulled a switchblade out and ran it over my throat, and told me they're going to kill me because I was a honky white and some other nasty things. We moved we moved right after that. So let's see. The lesson I learned from that is black people are evil. No, that guy was a jerk. That's the lesson I learned. And so we later lived in an apartment in a poor district in Buffalo, New York, of all places, with a primary school where all my classmates were Puerto Rican for some reason. I have no idea why they went to Buffalo, New York. It's cold. You think it's cold in New York City? It's cold in Buffalo. You got that lake effect. But anyway, so they all spoke Spanish. I didn't speak Spanish. I just moved to Buffalo. I didn't know it was a Spanish-speaking neighborhood. And all my classmates would not talk to me during recess and breaks and lunch because they just preferred to speak Spanish. So they just left me there. I also went to an all-white high school in basically an all-white county. Is that because black folk weren't allowed? No, it's because they were smarter than living in these scrap-hard hills of Appalachia. They found a better place to live, I guess. And then, of course, I've lived all over Africa where I've been a minority. I've lived in places where I've been a majority. I've been in very mixed places. So I've had a very unusual life and experience. And I always find it fascinating to hear people, the way they just address things. It's just kind of crazy. It's getting kind of dark there around you. Did you turn the sun off?
I did turn the sun off. It was evening time. Let me see. Well,
that's like being back in Africa. The sun went down.
Here
the
we
sun
go.
went down.
I know, yes. And now this quite literally could be right in the middle of nowhere, Matabeleland. It really could be.
You could be in the government enclave in Habaroni. They're sitting in one of the leafy little suburbs where I used to live.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, so one of the things I'm doing while I'm campaigning, I'm doing film work, I'm campaigning 7 days a week, and I'm also a property manager. And the property that I manage is this one right in front of me, but there's a barbecue happening outside. There's somebody in the recording studio downstairs. There's somebody upstairs by my campaign office. So it's a little noisy in the house. So I was like, you know what, let me just go outside and go enjoy chatting with them outside.
No, this is awesome. Hey, let me run down some of the stuff. You got the Trumpsters hat on there, and I'll be up front with you, Earl. I have a beef with Donald Trump, goes back to 1983, and I don't forgive. I don't forgive. Oh, I forgive, but I don't forget. In 1983, he insisted the USFL, because he was the owner of the New Jersey Generals, play in the fall up against the NFL, and I thought that was crazy, and the league folded in 5 weeks, and I'll never forgive him because I love the New Jersey Generals and Herschel Walker, and I loved so. But seriously, no. But when he came out in the Republican primaries, and I told a lot of my conservative. Now I'm not an evangelical, but I have a lot of friends who are evangelicals, and they were all in for Trump, and they said this is so important because of court appointments. And I said, yeah, okay, I agree with you, but the bottom line is this guy's a charlatan. He's P.T. Barnum. He's gonna sell you a bill of goods. I mean, his whole life he's been back and forth, but largely Democrat. He used to believe in abortion. I mean, he's gonna break your heart. I'm gonna vote for him, because I can't vote for the felon. I mean, she violated the Espionage Act. I was a counterintelligence. I don't need to go to court. So I can't vote for her. So I'm going to vote for the Trumpster. But I have to say that oh, my goodness, he has absolutely governed as one of the most conservative presidents in history with sustained foreign policy. The guy has been unbelievable. Listen, as you can see, I'm all in on the Trumpster and not ashamed of it all. I also, back in 2016, didn't deny I was voting for Trump. I said I'm voting for him. I wasn't afraid. But now people are afraid because they're getting attacked. But let me go through a few things here very quickly. Tell me if I missed something here, okay? Now, I don't know if you're focused on this, but I do pay attention to some of his policies. You probably are too. And the reason I mention this is because a question one of the viewers had, and we'll get to that question. But let's see. So he recently signed an executive order to deal with sickle cell anemia, if I'm not mistaken. That's an issue that affects almost entirely Black Americans. He also signed the largest ever financial assistance to historically Black colleges and universities, $500 million, if I'm not mistaken. He also, after Kim Kardashian and kind of got to him and talked to him, he championed something that the Congress has not done anything with years.
Step back. And they didn't do it on the 8 years of Obama. They had 8 years of a Black president, 8 years of identity politics, and they did not use the identity politics in their favor.
Exactly. So he did that. He's got, I could run through the list of things that he's got major appointments in his cabinet of Black Americans in key positions of power. We could just run through and
opportunity zones that gives a lot of these historically red line neighborhoods in my district, like Inglewood, Crenshaw, and South LA, an opportunity to finally reinvest in their community and like bring wealth to their community. And
that's one place where I was going next, was the opportunity zones. And all of these things he's done specifically. And here's the other thing too. Presidents rock up right before an election. Okay, let me go meet with all the church leaders, that sort of thing. Very cynical. But Donald Trump has been meeting with church leaders and community leaders in the Black community since before he became president, and throughout his presidency, even during the collusion hoax, the fake impeachment, all this stuff, he's still meeting with the Black community, and he doesn't run around and toot his horn. Hey, look at me! I was in East LA, or I was in South LA, or I was in Baltimore, or I was in DC. He just goes and does it, and because he doesn't make a big deal about it, people don't know about it. Plus, the press wouldn't cover it, but. I think that you're involved in something else that he brought up recently, and one of the viewers asked about this. He said that Trump mentioned Earl Webber in a recent speech in regard to his platinum plan, and a lot of people are confused about the platinum plan. Do you know much about that? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, there are a couple points to the platinum plan. One of the things I want to mention is that there was a rapper named Ice Cube that worked with a bunch of policymakers to come up with a list of ideas / demands for what is called the Contract for Black Americans or something like that. And he shopped this around to the Democrats, and the Democrat Party said that they'll get back to him after the election. And he shopped it around to the Republicans, and the Republican Party brought him in and had a discussion about how they could enact certain parts of his contract for Black Americans. And what they ended up coming up with was called the Platinum Plan, which is part of Ice-T's list that he ideated and part of the existing plan for Black Americans that the Trump administration had. And they did a merging of the two and tweaked some things. And they ended up coming up with a plan that involves providing $500 billion in small business loans so that 100,000 new, I think it's 100,000 new jobs can be created or businesses can be created in the Black community. I want to share a couple stats really quickly. The Black spending in the United States accounts for $1.2 trillion of commerce every year, $1.2 trillion. But only 2% of those $1.2 trillion are spent in the Black community. So while we have the Asian dollar lasting 28 days in the Asian community and the Jewish dollar lasting 19 days in the Jewish community, the Black dollar lasts 6 hours in the Black community. So here we have severe, chronic economic disinvestment in our Black communities because even Black people in their own communities find reason to go to other communities to get the services that they need and the goods that they need. And it's important for us to start to incentivize people in our own communities, building businesses in our communities so that we can start keeping money circulating within our communities. That is one of the things that would be great. Not through a handout, tax and spend, but through low interest federal commercial business loans so that we can now invest, buy property, start a business, and now provide value for our community. And because we have a stake in the community, now more people will start to take care of their community instead of finding excuses for burning it to the ground.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Now, you mentioned something earlier that's a very important issue here, generational wealth. Now, unfortunately for me, there was no generational wealth that came down to me. So whatever wealth I have, I've had to earn and build my lifetime. But definitely generational wealth does play a role in perpetuating advantages that some people have over time. But here's a question. I mean, because it sounds as if you're a person of faith, and so I imagine you believe in family and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So if kids grow up in single parent families, how do you build generational wealth? Don't we have to fix the family unit first?
We certainly need to fix the family unit, and there are a couple of things that need to be done. From the government level, what I will say is that we have had the past 30 years of mass incarceration. And what happens with the war on drugs and mass incarceration that was propagated by the 1994 crime bill is that
Joe Biden.
It ripped a lot of people, a lot of particularly fathers out of the home, sometimes for comparatively menial crimes. Now, I say comparatively menial crimes because all crime is bad, but some crimes, even though it may have been their third offense, may not have warranted a life sentence. So some people's third offense on the 3 strikes rule was they probably robbed a convenience store or something like that. And then they ended up with a life sentence. So now that father is taken out, or that mother is taken out of the family, not for like 10 years or 20 years, but for their entire lifetime. And when you are starting to rip one parent out of the household, now all of the burden is placed on the existing parent. And this burden sometimes results in them having to take 2 or 3 jobs or getting on government dependence. So here we have welfare dependence being built. And then when you have a parent taking 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, well, if the child goes to school from 8 a.m. till 2 p.m., but the parent is working from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. to make ends meet, who is raising that child between when school lets out at 2 p.m. and when the parent gets home at 9 p.m.? The community is, whether for good or for bad. Yep. So if you want to see how the school to prison pipeline happens or how young kids get into the prison system very early, that is one of the ways. It's not having the structure of a 2-parent household, the structure and stability of a 2-parent household that is one of the contributing factors towards many people entering a life of crime very early. And that is how that system propagates. So here we have a situation where they're locked out economically, not able to buy houses because low interest federal housing loans weren't available for people in red line districts. You have mass incarceration, ripping one parent out of the house. You have single parenthood and welfare becoming a crutch, becoming a cudgel. It's quite literally hurting the Black community. And then that also resulting in further mass incarceration, and the cycle continues over and over again. So you have a lack of respect for life, a lack of respect for authority happening, and it continues on and on generationally. You wonder why there's a lack of respect for authority when it comes to dealing with police, a lack of respect for authority when it comes to dealing with teachers, a lack of respect for life when it comes to people being so flippant about abortion, when it comes to a lack of respect for other people's property, when it comes to feeling that it's okay to burn down a building when you don't get your way. This is how we got to where we are. And it's time for us to start voting conservatively to undo much of this damage. And it's going to take a generation or two to fix this, but we cannot be complacent.
No, absolutely. But historically in America, Black Americans or African Americans have been the largest ethnic minority in the country historically, until the last decade or so when Hispanics as a group. Of course, that's a difficult thing because Hispanics are considered white or like it's mixed. But whatever the case is, the group known as Hispanics are now technically larger than Blacks, about 19% of the population. And then Black Americans make up 13.5% of the population. But honestly, because of nearly 300,000 abortions every year in the Black community, were it not for immigration from Africa and then interracial marriage within America, the Black population in this country would be declining as a percentage of America's population. It's only holding steady because other groups are coming in here and joining and being considered part of the Black American community. These 300,000 abortions per year are very disheartening.
It is. When you consider that 46% of the Black community has been killed off due to abortion since 1973, Roe v. Wade. Like we talk about, oh, the Black population is only 13 million. It'll be a lot closer to 20 million right now had we not been killing off people and making excuses for and funding the facilitation of killing off Black babies left and right. And that is why it's so important for us to protect life at all stages of life, and also recognize that the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause applies to all human beings in America, even the ones in the womb. So you cannot strip someone of their 14, you cannot dehumanize a person in the womb to justify stripping them of their 14th Amendment protections. They are still protected under the 14th Amendment, their right to life and liberty, so that they can pursue their happiness in the way that they would like to. And we need to make sure we continue to champion that.
Well, I agree with you 100%, but unfortunately they're not protected under the 14th Amendment because their life is extinguished, and it's horrific. It's really sad. But I did want to turn this into an abortion conversation. But my point there is that as a power group or structure in society, African Americans, the so-called group of African Americans, are stagnant in so many ways in the size within the population. Now, the actual population of Black America is growing, of course, otherwise they would be declining. But they're no longer the largest minority in the country, and that has impacts when you're trying to get influence and leverage when it comes to politics. It does have an impact, and when you find yourself in places that traditionally don't have Hispanic populations, suddenly have Hispanic populations, you may find voices and votes paying more attention to the Hispanic community than the Black community. So the challenges that folks in Black America face, we need to address them, and we need to get serious about them, because your influence in many parts of the country, not you, Earl, but you, the Black American community, it's diminishing in many respects. In a lot of places where there's a lot of Black influence, urban centers, the cities are decaying and falling apart. Detroit's a ghost town. It's an absolute ghost town. You know, and 60
years of Democrat leadership.
Well, yeah.
Same thing with Chicago.
Well, look at Baltimore. You know, Pelosi's father was the mayor there a long time ago. And if it wasn't for, now I'll give him this, William Donald Schaefer was a Democrat, but he was a decent mayor of Baltimore. And not that he didn't have his challenges, but there was a renaissance in Baltimore. The Inner Harbor came back, and Little Italy grew. But we seem to be losing that traction now with this corrupt long-term dynasties on the city council over and over again, just basically handing their stuff off. It's just crazy. It's really, it's got to be disheartening for people. I can understand the dismay when people have to live in those circumstances. Now, in your district that you're in there, what's the biggest, is service industry? What's the big, I mean, obviously Beverly Hills, there's a lot of rich folks living there, but you got a lot of poor folks. Is there a garment industry? Is there a major factor that draws people to that part of town, or is it just a diverse economic activity?
So the economic activity, the bulk of it that happens that is noteworthy is the film industry, film and TV industry, particularly in Culver City. Okay. Because we have Sony Pictures, and we have other smaller film studios and production houses in the Venice and Santa Monica areas as well. We also have a major business center called Century City right in the district. So in addition to mostly it is the film industry. And of course, you may find many restaurants here and there, lots of farm to table restaurants. But you find that in the more western part of the district where you have the higher income the higher income communities. In the lower income communities, you see a lot of convenience stores. You see very few supermarkets. You go by block after block of things just being run down. I was putting out lawn signs in the district, and like, of course, I've been to almost every street in my district, but there are some parts that it was the first time going down that particular street, and I was just dismayed that we've had this district voting Democrat since 1993, 1994, almost 30 years of Democrats voting for Democrats in this district, and nothing much has changed. And what's even more disheartening is that when I come in with my solutions and I say, hey, let's apply these conservative values to fixing this problem, they consider me the devil. They think I'm a terrible human being for being a Republican, even though they've been living in squalor for all of these years. So we have a lot of work to do, and we need to finally get people to notice the impact of their vote. I've noticed that many people allow Democrats to apply all kinds of atrocities to their lives, but the moment that these atrocities start affecting their kids, that is when they start switching. That is when they start re-registering as Republican, because they don't want the effects of their voting habits to start affecting their kids when it comes to stripping them of their economic freedom and their education, and when it comes to stripping them of their medical freedom. All of these things are things to bring up, and how it affects their kids when it comes to getting people to finally realize it's time to vote Republican.
Now there's a point I want to get to from your issues of making America great here about policing. I'll get to that in a moment, but I just want to run through. Just let me run through the list of great Democratic achievements here. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, as a young man, I was 17 at university, and I became a campaign manager for one of my classmates. Helped him run. He got elected to city council. First student from High University. I was a young Republican. I was all in with Republicans because I was a Reagan kid. I was all into Reagan. And then I became an officer, and I followed Colin Powell's example by not disclosing my affiliation. And I was independent for all those years until I retired. And I registered as a Republican in November so that I could vote in a primary, because I haven't voted in a primary since 1988. But I voted in every election. I just couldn't vote in a primary because in Ohio, where I vote, you have to be in a party, so I couldn't do it. So now I'm a Republican. But we'll get to that in a second. But I'm just going to run through the list of evils. Of achievements of the Democratic Party. The modern Democratic Party's the first Democratic president was Andrew Jackson, the racist Andrew Jackson, who stole land from Native American tribes, the Cherokees, the Seminoles, and forced them to march out to the Oklahoma Territory on the Trail of Tears. That's very proud of them. It was then, of course, we had the Civil War, and then the states breaking away from the Union. Good example, many of them Democrats breaking away from the Union, so they left the Union.
Yeah, those Dixiecrats down south.
Yep. And then, of course,
fighting to keep slavery alive under the guise of states' rights. Can you imagine?
Yep.
Going to war to keep chattel slavery alive. But keep going.
All right. So we're running off the big hits for the Democratic Party here. So the next one is that, of course, to my great pride, we kept the federal army in the states in insurrection after the Civil War for a dozen years to implement martial law and to make sure that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were actually followed. And they were.
Which were passed by Republicans.
Of course, because the states in insurrection couldn't vote, and the abolitionists in the North are the ones who pushed it through. But absolutely right. But while the army was down there, by and large, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were largely respected. It was only after Reconstruction, when we pulled the federal army out of the South, that the large, not entirely, there's some Republicans too, but largely Democrats formed the Klan. They went around, they did the lynching campaigns, they denied civil rights, they put Jim Crow laws. They put Jim Crow laws in place.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, burning down Rosewood, Florida, burning down Black Wall Street.
And so we'll jump ahead a little bit. So that's the Klan. Then we have the president himself, who for the first time ever segregated the federal workforce. That would be Woodrow Wilson, the racist himself, Woodrow Wilson. He segregated the federal workforce in the early part of the 20th century. It had been integrated before that. He segregated the workforce. And then, of course, to the great shame of the White House, the first film, as a filmmaker, the first film ever shown in the White House was, of course, Birth of a Nation, a Klan relishing, promoting racist film that promoted that sort of thing. Democrats, once again. When we jump forward to King Franklin Roosevelt with other great achievements, he incarcerated into concentration camps all Japanese Americans on the basis of their appearance, and his Supreme Court said it was legal. Okay, so that's another achievement. And then we go down, and we always hear, and I love Dinesh D'Souza because he tells the story in this correctly.
Did you just talk about Theodore Roosevelt or Franklin Delano Roosevelt?
Franklin, King Franklin Roosevelt.
Yeah, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, from the early 1930s. Yeah, he was the one who instituted, signed into law the National Housing Act of 1934, which allowed for massive redlining and discrimination when it came to housing loans. But yeah, let's keep going.
Well, since you reminded me, let's go back to it. They also created Social Security on the farce that it wasn't a tax, it was a retirement. Then it wasn't a tax, it was retirement. But what that did is it excluded people working the railways. Well, many Black American men who had formal employment were porters on the railroads, so they weren't part of that. Now they did have a separate retirement, but domestic workers weren't part of it, and people in the service industry weren't part of it. So they were excluded. Largely Black Americans excluded from Social Security in the early days of that thing. And, Franklin Roosevelt gets all this credit for being a civil rights advocate. He didn't care about civil rights. His wife did. His wife was big into civil rights, but he gets all this credit. So we jump forward now to the 1950s, and it's a Republican who uses the Army, the active duty Army, to go to Little Rock, Arkansas to enforce Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yes.
That's right. Republicans putting the Army there to make sure a little girl gets to go to school because the Democrat racists in the South prevented it from happening.
And didn't the Democrat governor, try to stand in the way as a symbol to stop her from getting in to the schoolhouse? I'm almost sure of that.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's the case. But you always get this story about the big switch. The Democrats like to lie. They're little hippie leftists from the 70s who now run education. Well, look, all the racists that were the Democratic Party, they became Republicans. But the only example they have of anybody like that is Strom Thurmond, who was 137 when he finally died in the Senate.
The singular one. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. There can't be a party switch because the Republican Party platform hasn't changed much since 1864.
No.
It started the Republican Party was founded as the abolitionist party with the express purpose of ending slavery and pushing individual rights, individual liberties, and individual responsibility. Absolutely. That is still the same today. It was the same in the late 1800s. It's the same in the early 1900s. It's the same in the 1960s. It's the same right now. So you can't say the parties switched because even to the core, the ideology of why the party exists has not changed.
Absolutely.
For its entire existence.
It's absolutely true. And so
it's a big lie.
Well, they're all big lies. I mean, I always love this thing like, the Republicans are the party of business. Look at the donations that McCain got from Wall Street, and look at the donations Obama got from Wall Street. He dwarfed McCain by a factor of 8 or 10 for every dollar that McCain got from Wall Street. And the same thing with Romney. Romney with Bain Capital. Oh, it's all the Republicans and Wall Street. No, it's not. Look at the actual donations. It's a matter of public record. Just go to the Federal Elections Commission. Let me shift gear real quick here because I want to get to an issue you had here. Now, this is I'm going to confess. Now, so you're a filmmaker, and you may appreciate this, but I'm a fanboy when it comes to Bosch. The series that's on HBO. I love Bosch, and it's I've been to LA. I'm not a major fan of LA. I'll be honest about there. I lived out there when I was a kid, but no, I'm just being honest with you here. I mean, nothing against it, but it's just a lot of people, man, a lot of traffic. But I love Bosch, and I feel like I'm an Angelino when I watch Bosch because I see all these things and I recognize these places. But one of the things you see on that show, of course, is this whole issue in a couple of the seasons between improving police and community relations. That's a big part of it. You got Irv Irving, who's that actor's amazing. He was on The Wire, I think, years ago. That was with Baltimore, but he plays the police chief there. And I love that show because they talk about police and community relations. That's a challenge in Los Angeles, is it not, historically? And that's something you're concerned about. But something I've always talked about is community policing. That's important, where cops are walking the beat. They know people in the neighborhood. So they're trusted members of the neighborhood. So people come to them and don't see them as an opposition or outside force. Is that part of what you're concerned about? Or how are you concerned about community and police relations?
So one of the things that we need to recognize first and foremost is that police are not separate from the community, but they're an integral part of the community. So it should never be police and the community. It's police and the rest of the community because they are part of the community. And the moment you start doing an us versus them, then it only greatens the divide. So if we want to ever improve police-community relations, we have to start from the standpoint that they are our cousins, they are our friends, they are our neighbors, they are our shopkeepers, they are our business owners, they are our school coaches, they are our churchgoers. We must recognize that we're part of the same community. The next thing we need to recognize is that demonizing and defunding the police does not improve police-community relations, but only works to further create a great divide between police and the rest of the community. The third thing we need to recognize is that if you want to improve police-community relations, you need to have a greater understanding of the dynamics of how police and the rest of the community interact. So what does that mean? It means getting involved on a very detailed, very local level with your local law enforcement. I did a documentary about police-community relations, and one of the commentators, who's a cop herself, said, if you want to improve police-community relations, join the police force, become a police officer yourself, become a reserve officer, become a part of the community collaboration division of your local law enforcement, so that you can start to see what it's like to be a police officer, what is expected of the community, what the community expects of law enforcement, and how law enforcement and the rest of the community can work together. We need to make sure that we are not defunding the police, but actually making sure that our police resources go to improving training, persistently improving training, so that we're constantly expecting better of ourselves and doing better ourselves, but also recognizing that the community has a role to play, the rest of the community has a role to play when it comes to improving police-community relations. The onus is not just on the police. We need to make sure that we are supporting and championing a respect for elders, a respect for authority, because when there's a lack of respect for authority, that is one of the contributing factors to a breakdown in communication, a breakdown in respect. Then another thing we need to make sure of that our elected officials are actually working to hold law enforcement accountable when they do very terrible things. We need to make sure that we champion great law enforcement officers, and also recognize that out of the close to 1 million law enforcement officers all across the country, yes, there are going to be some law enforcement officers that don't do the right thing, and we need to make sure that they're replaced and moved on to a different industry altogether, not shifted from one police department to the other so that they can go inflict more damage.
Yeah.
Let's place them in a whole new career and get them out of policing so that we can make room for other great police officers that we can champion and continue to build positive police-community relations. I have this little thing in my pocket. I wore this jacket yesterday to an event. Defend the LAPD rally that happened in Glendale, just north of my district. And there was a tent for the LAPD Reserve. So I took some of their materials about joining the LAPD Reserve. One of the requirements of joining the LAPD Reserve is that you commit to doing 2 shifts as a police officer every month. And this is one of the things I'm looking into, especially for the next election cycle. It's one thing to be in politics and say that you're championing positive police-community relations. It's another thing to, while you're running for your next election cycle, actually become a police officer so that you can have a very intimate idea of what it's like to be in policing and develop even more well-rounded solutions for fixing police-community relations. And we understand that it took generations for police-community relations to devolve to the position that it's in now. And we understand that it's going to take generations to fully fix police-community relations, but we should not be complacent. We should not use this as a reason to throw our hands up and think that it's a lost cause. It is not a lost cause, and we all have a role to play to ensure that we are improving police-community relations from a family level, to a training level, to a funding level, to a community collaboration level. And also, we need to make sure that we're championing those 2-parent households so that we can instill structure in people's lives, instill proper values in people's lives so that they can engage in all interactions in their community, not just police interactions, but all interactions in their community in a positive and uplifting way.
Wow, that's well said. Listen, for the audience that's here, we expected a small audience tonight because it's pretty late. Also, I've been on 3 times today, but people will watch this after the fact. And you and I talked. I'm going to get you back on here. We'll invite you back on.
Excellent.
And we're going to pick a more ideal time, which gets an audience during the daytime all over the country, plus the audience overseas. So we'll do that coming up. I got a week here where I don't want to say stuck. I'm still committed to the War College, helping them out this week. But after this week, I'll be back on the table. And as we get closer to election, we'll get you back on. And we'll talk more about your platform positions. But before we go, there's a couple things I want to say and share with you and get your feedback. I don't understand how we got to this stage. And you don't try to answer this because I think it's a complicated answer. But if you agree, just let me know or disagree. But I don't know how we got to the stage where people so distrust police because people want to be confrontational with police. I mean, when I get pulled over, and I've been pulled over, people always talk about driving while black. Well, there's also something called driving while in the military. And let me explain. Most active duty military people have license plates from outside the state that they're stationed in if they're in the U.S. because they're from another state, and that's allowed. You're not required to change your plates in another state when you're military. I've been pulled over at least 30 times in the few times I've been stationed in America by law enforcement, doing nothing wrong, just pulled over, and I call it while driving in the military.
Same thing here, about 50 times.
Yep.
Doing nothing wrong.
Exactly.
Being pulled over. 100% of my police interactions have ended amicably.
Same here.
Let me mention that.
Yep,
100% of them.
Same
so, like, there is a way that we can approach members of law enforcement so that we can both have a positive interaction. So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say that a couple of times I was treated less than fairly, not
battered and bruised.
Yeah, I wasn't touched or anything like that, but I mean, I was pulled over and I was issued a citation for something that didn't happen. I went and fought it in court and it was thrown out because it was, anyway, the judge agreed with me, but like a speeding ticket, going 70 when I'm going 55 and I've got cruise control in my car and I've got data on board on the GPS, they can prove it. So anyway, but I just was given a ticket for going 70 in New York. And so I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. And the police officer was a little bit rude, but
you were able to hit 70 in New York?
No, not
New York.
No. This was near Batavia. I was going 55. Honest to gosh, I was going 55. I was cruise control, and a cop gave me a ticket. He saw my Maryland plates. Anyway, now that's not the normal for police, but anyway. But the point is, but my first inclination isn't to be aggressive or combative with the police officer. He came up to the car.
Don't hold court with the cop.
Exactly.
You will never win.
You will lose every time.
You will never win holding court with a cop in your car.
Exactly.
No.
And that's the point I'm getting at is that where kids get this combative thing, we got to stop that. Whether you like the cops or not, you show respect to people in positions of authority, not because of who they are, but because of the position. If they abuse it, then you take that to the court. You take that to an adjudicator. You don't try to.
Court. Yes.
That's right. You don't try to adjudicate it on the spot because you're going to lose and just make the situation worse. Now, before we go, because we're going to take off here in just a second, because I know you're tired. It's been a long day, and I've got to get some sleep and get up myself. But I'm guessing that your parents must be very proud of you.
Oh, they very much are. Yeah. I have an older sibling who works in the hotel industry. She's doing very well for herself. Married a guy with 3 doctorate degrees who's 5 years younger than her. My brother works in the hospital industry, and he does computer network security. I went into the film industry, and now I'm running for Congress. So we have parents who are over the moon, overjoyed.
Well, apparently they've done something right. Your parents raised you all. They got.
I would say so.
Yeah, they got you out of a place where it was very dangerous, and unfortunately you had a refuge you could come to. You came to America, although maybe Baltimore might not have been the best refuge initially, but you had to go somewhere. Now, I'm from Baltimore, so I mean I can diss on it, right? But it's funny. I don't know if. Let me ask you this before we do go, because you lived in Baltimore. Are you able to? I can discern the accent difference normally between, and I'm talking about mostly white folks here, because there's but I can tell the accent between Arnold, down near Annapolis, Glen Burnie, Severna Park, Greenhaven, Brooklyn, Dundalk, Essex. I can tell where people are from when they start talking. I'm like, oh, you're from Dundalk.
Oh my gosh. I can tell when people are from Dundalk.
Yes.
And I have a lot of jokes about people who live in Dundalk that I will never repeat online because I'm in politics now. I'm so glad I never went down the path of doing stand-up comedy because I would just be making life hard for myself. But there are instances where I can tell somebody from Dundalk versus somebody from Baltimore.
Exactly.
Because the Baltimore folks, they have a Baltimore accent. Yeah. Oh, they're from Baltimore? Okay. You get it.
Yeah, I got it. Well, the thing that I miss, and now being here in central Pennsylvania, it's normally not a problem. Although this summer, the summer of Rona, has not been ideal. But normally summertime, it's I'm spending a lot of money on blue crabs. I go down there and get some steamed crabs.
Oh my gosh, I missed that. I missed that. Oh my gosh.
There you go. You definitely got the Baltimore in you if you like the blue crabs and seafood. It's awesome. So listen, Earl, can I get you back on the channel before the election? You think
Yes,
okay.
yes,
All
you
right.
can.
And I promise what we'll do on that one is we'll do a quick introduction of you again because we'll have a much larger audience.
Yeah, for
so
the
people-
audience.
And then also we'll go through your issues that are important to you, that you really care about, the reasons why you're running for office, because you've got some great points here. We touched on one or two of them.
Yeah,
so we'll
national
talk about it.
security, police community relations, education, all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, all those things are
Excellent.
things that rock with me, education being one of the biggest ones. And we can talk a lot about education next time. I think that'd be awesome. All right. Before we go, I've got to explain. So Bosch Zebra, who's in South Africa, he says, blue crabs explain.
Oh my gosh, blue crabs.
Maryland blue crabs.
It is something, I wouldn't say native to Maryland, but it's a big deal in Maryland. And it's primarily from the Chesapeake Bay. It's in the Delaware River. It's down in Ocean City. It's all through Worcester County. So that's like Ocean City, Salisbury, all of that area. It's just blue crabs. And then going straight out into the ocean for about another 20 miles, 30 miles, you can find crab potters. And the reason I know all of this is because in 2010, I think they found me. In 2010, I was a travel journalist for a travel blog called Host Our Coast. It was a way for people to find fun and interesting things to do in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. And one of the adventures that we always went to do, in addition to wine tours and brewery tours, was we went and did things like crab potting, to go scoop up buckets and buckets of crabs, or doing clamming, things like that. And I got to see what it's like to be a fisherman out in the water, catching these blue crabs, picking these blue crabs. And it's a major part of our culture. And you sprinkle some Old Bay on it and you have a great time. And I miss blue crabs. I haven't had a crab feast in a while. But the next election cycle, I'm going to make sure I have a crab feast.
Well, there you go. No, just a little more explanation for Bosch Zebra. Oysters, crabs, these are things that are huge. We're huge in numbers. They took a major decline when the bay got polluted in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It got cleaned up a lot. Crabs have come back. They're not as high as historically they were, but the watermen still catch a lot of crabs. It's sustainable now. The oysters are still in a little bit of jeopardy. But crabs are a Maryland tradition. They're steamed. They have seasoning, usually Old Bay or another one like that. Very spicy, very tasty. You crack them open, you eat them, and it's just part of the culture. And it's just, if you're from Maryland and you don't eat crabs, then you're not really from Maryland. Anyway.
Hey, you know what? If I'm ever on the East Coast, I need to make sure to reach out to you so you can hop on down and we can go have a crab feast and do an episode of your show while picking crabs.
And I know exactly the place
I think that would be fun.
I know exactly the place we'll go. We'll go on the island right there, just across the Bay Bridge. There's a couple great places for crabs right there. We'll sit in that spot down by Annapolis. That'll be great. Yeah, it's a fantastic. It's a part of our culture, and people from not from the area don't know. And here's the thing. When crabs are out of season, because you don't get them all year round in Maryland, this is for the audience, not so much for Earl, you know this, but they still get crabs in Maryland because we're just addicts for crabs. So they'll bring them up from Carolinas, where the water is still suitable and they reproduce, or down in Louisiana, and they bring them up. And they get them, and there's a season where it crosses over, where you get the Maryland blue crabs and you get the other ones. And I'll go to the places where I buy the crabs, and I'm like, are these from Maryland? Yeah. And then I take them home, I'm like, I go back next time. Those are Louisiana crabs. Those are not Maryland blue crabs. I can tell the difference. Don't try to snow me. And people always say, how can you tell the difference? I said, well, because, we had all these decades of pollution in the Chesapeake Bay. So when you get Maryland blue crabs, I can taste the mercury and the cadmium and the nickel that's in the crab.
Oh my gosh. It adds to the flavor.
It does. All right. We should probably end it. If you like any comments or questions or things you want to leave us with?
I will say this, that elections are a lot of work. And it is important to get everyone mobilized to get out and vote this election, especially since upwards of 12 states have signed legislation into law that said that they will hand over their electoral college votes to the winner of the national popular vote. So we need to make sure that we all get out and vote for President Donald Trump, so that if President Trump wins the national popular vote, California will have to begrudgingly hand over its 55 electoral college votes to President Trump. Now, how delicious is that?
Well, it's ironic because for the better part of a century, it was a staunchly conservative state. That was the norm in California. It's only in the last 30, 40 years things have changed. In fact, George Herbert Walker Bush won California decisively in 1988, but he's the last Republican to win it. It's just really gone off the rails. You know, and before we go, just one other thing since you brought up, you know, people, Hillary Clinton, who still seems, you know, they're asking Donald Trump if he'll accept the results of the election. My question is, when will Hillary Clinton accept the results of the 2016 election?
Yeah, the Democrats have not accepted the 2016 election at all.
Yeah, and
they're just...
They keep going on about the popular vote. Well, Donald Trump lost the popular vote. Okay, well, let me put this in perspective for people, just show you how influential and why the Electoral College is so important. Is if you take the votes from California out of the election, right, as if California was its own bare republic and it's not part of the United States, Hillary Clinton got about 8 million votes in California. Donald Trump got around 4 million, so she won by almost 4 million votes in California. You take California's electoral votes off the board for her, and just leave Trump where he's at. And not only does he win decisively, it's a trouncing. And if you take out those, Donald Trump wins the election nationwide in 49 states by 2 million votes. He won the election by 2 million votes, minus California. And that shows you the influence one state can have. And that's why we have an interesting system, why we have our system that we have set up with the Electoral College, so that all because we're a union of states, not a union of people. It's not like there's Marylanders and Carolinians. We are states. And that's the union, and that's why the states have that importance.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also, 16% of the U.S. population thinks that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. That is why we have the Electoral College.
Well, listen, Errol, I was a dairy farmer, and I'm going to tell you that that's actually a true statement. If you have Swiss cows, you get brown milk. I'm just saying. Well, I was a dairy farmer. That part's true in high school. I was a dairy farmer.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's awesome to have you on. We'll get you back on here. And it's been a real pleasure to chat with you tonight. I know it's been a long day for you, but listen, I love my hat, but I'm loving that hat. That looks like that looks like a Showtime.
Let me show you.
It looks like Showtime at the Apollo kind of hat. I'm loving that thing.
Yeah. It has a brand. It has an embossing in it. It has the Donald Trump signature on it.
Oh man,
there's a lot going on. It's a very busy hat.
It is, but I'm loving it. But I'm loving
busy hat.
It's like McDonald's. I'm loving it.
Yes.
All right, Earl. That's it. I'll let you go ahead and drop off, and I'm going to close out the stream. Okay.
All right. You have yourself a great day.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey, and you can find out more about me.
Oh yes.
I totally forgot this.
Yeah.
Please make.
Whoops! It froze. Come back.
That's fine. It'll be back.
There, it's back now.
Make sure to go to Weber2020.com and donate to my campaign. And you can do phone banking from me from anywhere in the country. If you're an American citizen or a legal permanent resident, you can work on my campaign, make phone calls to get people out to vote. All of these things are important. Get involved at Weber2020.com. And I'm so grateful for you for allowing me on your platform to speak to all of your followers.
Oh, it's absolutely awesome to have you here. It's really great. Now the links should be below the video here, but I'm just going to put that in right now so it shows up in the chat. The link to your website there. I can also put in the link to your Facebook page for the campaign. We'll do that.
Yes.
Okay. So we got that right here.
Errol Webber for California.
Yeah, you've actually got some great content on there. A lot of people run for office just kind of have a page up, but your page actually tells me stuff. I mean, I've learned some stuff from it there.
Good.
You had your gun rally. Let me see if I can pull this up before we go, if I've got it there.
Oh, yeah, I got to go post the videos from the gun rally. That was a lot of fun.
Well, speaking of guns, I don't know if you can see the screen there, if you're watching it or not, but I've just put a picture of myself in Wyoming last month. I went out with the Special Operations Forces veterans trip to Wyoming with Wyoming Catholic College, and one of the things we did on the first day was cowboy action shooting, where we're firing Winchester 73 rifles, and we're pulling out, revolvers and shooting at targets, and there's a picture of me I just put on the screen out there. Since you're such a staunch Second Amendment person, that's why I put it up.
I want to check out the stream afterward, but yeah.
All right,
excellent.
Cool. All right, Earl, thanks a lot. I really appreciate being on the channel. We'll catch you later, and I'm going to close out. Folks, Errol Webber, candidate for California's 37th Congressional District, Republican, conservative, immigrant, and don't tell anybody, but I think he might be black. I couldn't tell. It's hard to tell. oh, he's black. He's black. Okay.
You have yourself a great day.
All right, take care.
All right, later.
All right, brilliant. Okay, so... Okay, folks, that's Errol Webber. Has he dropped off there? Okay. Okay, there he goes. All right, thank you so much, Errol Webber. What a fantastic, fascinating American there. Yes, an American. An immigrant. Don't believe the myths and fairy tales that people tell you about America. This is a brilliant country. It's a wonderful country where people come for second, third, fourth, and fifth chances at times. But in Earl's case, clearly he took advantage of the first opportunity and ran with it. A filmmaker, a candidate for Congress, a true American, an immigrant, someone I think we can all get around. And his ideas are fascinating and amazing. So I really enjoyed having him on tonight. I apologize for the hour, but he had a long day. He had to reschedule. We would have had a much bigger audience earlier. We expected that. So he's going to be back on the program before the election. We'll talk to him again on how it's going, and we'll get him on at a time when most of the audience is on here. Usually that's noon Eastern Standard Time and 6 p.m. in Botswana and South Africa. That gets the European audience early evening in Africa. It also gets the East Coast, and we pick up people even on the West Coast and the Mountain States and Central Time. So we'll be doing that again with Earl. It was fantastic. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. It's been a really fascinating, interesting weekend. We pushed this weekend well beyond 15,000 subscribers to the channel, 160 plus paying members of the channel now. Massive growth on the channel this weekend, in large measure because people tuned in for balanced, objective, insightful, thoughtful commentary. Am I tooting my own horn? I suppose I am for that, but I think the fact that people show up proves that they're finding something that resonates with them, that they appreciate an alternative news source, alternative analysis, and that's what you get here at Chris Wide Africa. And whether it's rugby or it's politics of the USA or it's Africa, South Africa in particular, anywhere in between, we try to bring that to folks. We try to discuss the fraudulent media. As you saw yesterday on Saturday's stream, I discussed how the media is in love with Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand and propping up and saying what a wonderful responsive job she's done with the coronavirus campaign. New Zealand was ahead of everyone else. Well, she's done a wonderful job, and New Zealand's done a very impressive job, but that's a fictional narrative running. As you saw yesterday, those who watched the program, I put the timeline up of what the Trumpster did, Donald Trump did in the U.S., and the actions New Zealand took, and on every single action, New Zealand was always behind the United States and took action after the United States did, whether it was blocking international travel or it was forming a national emergency, things like that. Trump did that long before she ever did, and I'm talking about the number of days from when the cases were identified. And they had dozens of cases in New Zealand before they ever declared an emergency. Donald Trump did that when we had 2 reported cases in the United States, 2 cases, and he declared not declared national emergency, but he started the lockdown, or the flight stopping, excuse me. So while they're denigrating, disparaging Donald Trump, and they're holding up and propping up the Prime Minister of New Zealand, it's a dishonest narrative. New Zealand did a great job, but so did Trump. Stop the lies. And also, I pointed out that while they're raving about New Zealand is a country of 4.9 million people. It's had almost 1,900 cases of COVID-19 and 25 deaths. They've never said a single word about Taiwan. Taiwan, with 24 million people, has only 535 cases of COVID-19, and they're 160 kilometers from mainland China, where this thing came from. 165 kilometers, only 535 cases, 24 million people. That's 1/4 of the cases took place in New Zealand, a country that has 1/5 the population of Taiwan. Taiwan never had a lockdown. They never forced masks. They followed normal pandemic procedures in isolating the vulnerable, isolating and quarantining the people who are infected, and going about their business. No lockdowns, no masks, no capricious nonsense, and Taiwan has been brilliant. And that's why the media covers it up. If the media wants to champion a country that's done a great job, why aren't they talking about Taiwan? New Zealand's done a good job, but when you say New Zealand reacted faster than anybody else, that's simply not true. Donald Trump reacted faster than anyone else. New Zealand followed suit in every case. Anyway, folks, that's it. Appreciate you tuning in tonight. I hope that you found it interesting, and we'll get our candidate for California's 37th district back on sometime. No, sorry, I'm getting kind of tired here. Sometime very soon. Thanks a lot, folks. God bless. Have a good night. And my many thanks to Errol Webber for coming on. He's a brilliant guest and fascinating American. And I look forward to talking to him about other things, including his filmmaking career, if that's something we have time to talk about coming up in the future. Anyway, folks, have a good night. Tomorrow, I'm not doing a morning stream because I'm kind of knackered, and I've got to be at the War College by 6:45. But I will try to get on, check my content out, look for videos. I did a video earlier giving an assessment and a grading of who won and who didn't win in the Senate call mess that took place on the 16th. All right, folks, God bless and have a good night. And, whoops, that didn't come up. Sorry. I'm definitely tired. Okay, there we go. That's it. I'm off the screen. Closing video.